Okay, cool. So I had a video I was going to do today, but I kind of didn't feel like doing it. So I'm just going to show up here for a little bit and then I'll probably do that one the next day maybe or the day after that. But I figured I would just see what everyone is up to and what everyone is reading and try this whole live stream thing, even though I'm not sure it's my thing yet. I'm definitely very much one of those people who think things out before they speak and have something to say whenever they speak. So the vibing thing, we'll see how that goes. But I'll talk about a book or two that I've read. You can talk about anything reading related or anything really. And we'll just see how it goes. So looking at the comments here, there's already some coming in. So we have, since I can't watch live, my current read is Ray Naylor's Where the Axe is Buried. I was looking at this because this was actually here before I started streaming, since he said he couldn't make it, and it actually looks really cool. There's not very many people who have reviewed it or read it yet, but Where the Axe is Buried that was brought up is about an authoritarian federation, and there's this president who downloads himself into new bodies so that he can stay in power. So the idea of like an authoritarian regime that never ends, which sounds pretty cool, could be pretty cool. Not too many people have reviewed it yet, so new and maybe worth looking into. I might look into that too. And then a couple people have said that they've enjoyed my Substack essays. Thank you for that. I've been experimenting, and the essays I've been writing on Substack are not all related to reading, even though since I am such a voracious reader, sometimes what I read will make it into those. So there's definitely a little bit of a mix, but there's also just a lot of personal things I've been through in my life, but not in a way that's, I guess, self-deprecating or just sitting there and wallowing about things, but trying to sort of rethink through different topics and just kind of have a public space to think. If you are very familiar with essay types, rather than trying to have a thesis statement that I prove constantly, even though there could be a little bit of that, I kind of like to do the whole just thinking on the page, but having it kind of connect in a way that shows how my brain thinks. And I've been having a lot of fun with that. So thanks for telling me about that. And apparently I'm officially a streamer, and that's kind of scary. I don't know about that, but we'll see. We're doing it today. And it says I seem like a planner. I do seem like a planner because I am a planner. Switzerland, cool. Oh my gosh. I didn't realize that so many people would be commenting if I went live. I really thought that I would be talking to myself for a little bit. So I had things that I could talk about if I was talking to myself, but apparently I'm not. Currently reading The Serpent's Curse by Lisa Maxwell, the third book in the Last Magician series. I have not read that. I don't know very much about that, but that could be cool. Greetings. I am reading Recursion by Blake Crouch after finishing Dark Matter. I need to read Blake Crouch. I read another author that gets compared to him a lot recently. Oh my gosh, what was the name of that one? You might hear my dogs. I have Percy. I have a miniature poodle Bichon mix, and he is very small. He's, well, not very small. He's like 20 pounds. There's smaller small dogs, but he is a protector. So if he sees someone do something like, I don't know, read in their backyard, he is very, very concerned and will always let me know. Definitely can be a little bit difficult when filming videos sometimes when you have a dog that wants to protect you from everything in the world. Oh my gosh, I don't remember the name of it, but it was really good, but it wasn't Blake Crouch. One second. It was Nicholas Binge. This is one that I've read recently that I've seen compared to things like Blake Crouch, but if I think about it, I don't actually think I've read one of Blake Crouch's novels, but that is something I would definitely do eventually. Doing a reread of Perdido Street Station and just started a buddy read of Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales. I feel like I haven't actually read all of the Grimm's fairy tales. I know there's a lot of books where they kind of combine a lot of them together. And I feel like I've always read certain ones, but there's just so many that you could go through in that. So I think that would be a really fun project to just do someday. Reading Sleeping with the Enemy by Nancy Price, which is also a movie with Julia Roberts. That could be kind of fun. I've been going back and forth on, I'm assuming this is a romance book because I have not read it, but I've been going back and forth on what I really enjoy in romance books. And I mentioned this on my channel, and it's kind of like the opposite of what might be a lot popular right now. And just to be clear, I read the popular ones too. I'm not a complete book snob, but I'm thinking I might read this next, which is Ride With Me by Thomas Costain. And it is written in, I think, 1940 is when he wrote it. And it's about two people who fall in love in 1805. And the woman is an English woman and the man is French. And it's in the time period where the English think that Napoleon, the leader of France, might go over the English Channel. So it's kind of like this time period that really did exist where they thought that could be a possibility. Didn't actually end up happening, but there's just a lot of anxiety around it. And I think just the idea sometimes of having a romance that also is something else, like a history thing, is kind of interesting to me. It says it's packed with details of prisons, hospitals, gambling, as well as an actual London newspaper that published in 1805. So it kind of mixes in romance with historical things that kind of really did happen. And I think some of the snippets from the newspaper might be from actual newspapers. I'm not sure on that one. But I'm thinking about reading that. But that is what I'm thinking of for myself in romance books coming up. Oh gosh, this is so crazy. Dark Matter, you thought Dark Matter was fun. I actually think I was watching the TV show, which I know is probably not the thing to admit on a booktube channel, that I have not read the book, but I have watched some of the TV show, and I thought the TV show was fun up to this point. I didn't get very far in it, though, so maybe I didn't like it that much. I don't know. I would totally go back to that, and maybe I should read the book first before I go back to that. Listening to Dungeon Crawler Carl. I read the first 3 of those, and I think they're really fun, and I think that's just one of those things that you can get really sucked into and read for hours without even realizing that you're reading. I did not actually listen to any of the audiobooks, even though I heard because this is one of the most popular series right now, if you're unaware of it. I heard a lot of people love the audiobooks because the narration is so good, but I don't really use Audible, and I think it's like locked into Audible. So I've looked for it on my library, which they can't get it because of Audible, and I oftentimes will get an audiobook that I can't get from my library from Libro FM. And it always brings up that question of, do I get all the Amazon stuff again just to be able to enjoy the couple things that you can't get anywhere else? And sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. And I just read the books physically from those really cool hard copies because of that issue. I'm really enjoying Christopher Buehlman's Between Two Fires. That's so hilarious. I am reading that right now. I am about 50%. Well, I generally read several books at once. I am 50% into that one, and I was going to, well, I still will. In my next video, I'm actually going to take a chapter from that book to discuss a bigger theme on reading, which seems unlikely because it is like this medieval plague story that has some of these notes of a little bit of like Christianity as mythology. It's a cool book, but it's, not the one that you would expect to spark a conversation about reading and stories in general. And I'm going to do that, and that will probably be up later this week. So you might want to watch that. Oh my gosh, there's so many here. I had no idea that there'd be so many people commenting on this. I'm reading The God of Small Things. I don't know what that one is about, but I'd be curious to know what that one is about. I haven't read any other Blake Crouch. Yeah, I still need to read them, like I mentioned. I'm reading Metal Slinger, recommended by a friend. I've seen a few It's the Worst Book Ever titles on YouTube, but I'm enjoying it. It is a romantasy. I feel like that's just kind of like one of those things on YouTube that's it's really tempting because you can totally get easy views on YouTube by putting up a romantasy book. on your thumbnail and just completely bashing it. So that might be part of it. There have definitely been I have not read this one. I have no idea about that one. There's definitely been some romantasy books where I'm like, this is legitimately very bad, but some of them are just escapist fun. And I think that there needs to be room for that. It doesn't all have to be, I'm reading to sound smart and to be like sort of academic sounding, or I'm reading for, I don't know. I don't like how everything is framed. I think it's totally fun to just read a romantasy book and enjoy it, even if it's not the highest literary quality. And I think that sometimes when we pigeonhole it too much, we forget that some of them are actually well written. They might not be the majority because so many are being published right now, but some of them can be pretty good. Just finished Indian Horse by Richard Wagamese. Oh my gosh, I'm bad at pronouncing words like that. Devastating but good, connected with me. He felt real. I have not read that, but I love it when books feel real. There has definitely been more discussion on if a lot of more of the modern books are feeling real to the same extent. And I think part of that could just be that, people have mentioned over and over again that the books that you might be talking about from a long time ago are the ones that have lasted the test of time. I'm working on my debut novel, so I'd love to hear other authors' journeys. I do not write books, so I do not have a journey to share with you. I did, mentioned earlier in the comments, I had been starting to write some just short little think piece is a weird term for it, but short little essays over on Substack, and I think that's been fun. But as of right now, I don't see myself as becoming a fictional author, and I think there needs to be room for it. I don't think everyone is meant to do that, and I think some people are, and you definitely could be. But I think that there's been a lot of people in different time periods who have done writing in other areas, and I think that's kind of what makes me feel more in my zone, is when I'm writing things that are a little bit closer to reflections, essays, nonfiction. But there are tons of channels that exist to kind of bring authors together. And although I like to talk to authors, I don't know if I'll ever be one. We'll see. Oh yeah, the dog. Recursion. That one was very good. Okay. I wonder if the people who have read Blake Crouch, is that where you would start, or would you do the Dark Matter book? Because I could definitely read one pretty soon. The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. The Warmth of Other Suns. The Epic Story. Oh, it's a Pulitzer Prize-winning book. The Great Migration of 6 million Black citizens who fled the South for the North and West in search of a better life from World War I to 1970. Oh, that could be really cool. That is something I would definitely read. I'm reading Ender's Game, but that's because my reading is not my own right now. All my reading is based on my next teaching practicum coming up in a month. Up next is Macbeth and Catcher in the Rye. Are you becoming a teacher? Good luck. I did not last very long, but there's definitely different environments in different areas of the world and in different areas of the country. And I think you're Canadian, so you might be okay. I enjoyed Ender's Game, but I think I read it 10 years ago, so I don't know how much I could say about it other than I enjoyed it 10 years ago. Thank you. I got $5. Thanks. That's kind of crazy. My current read is The First King of Shannara, my 8th book in the Shannara series, and really enjoying it. Might be my favorite one of the series so far. I have heard about that series so much. I think I have a hard time reading the super, super long fantasy series all the time just because they take so long to get through. But in every one that I have read, I've enjoyed, and I know that a lot can be done in fantasy. So I could be convinced to pick up something, again, that is 8 books, but it would take a little bit. There's a lot of great creators on AuthorTube. I agree. I've seen them. I've lurked. I might not fit into AuthorTube exactly, but I've definitely lurked. It's like looking at booktuber Blair Waldorf every time a video comes out. Yeah, I don't know what that is. I'm reading The Witch King, Such Lovely Skin, Sister Song, and The American War. Oh, you are a person like me. I don't know. if you are a man or a woman. But yeah, I always have several books going at once. I think some people are like, oh, if you have several books going at once, you can't pay attention, you get confused between the storylines. I've never had that problem. I definitely will generally read several books that are in different genres, and I think that that can kind of help because in addition to being a fiction reader, I'm a big nonfiction reader. So if you're reading a book that is fiction and a book that is nonfiction at the same time, usually it's not too hard to keep apart. So yes, I do that too. Reference to Gossip Girl if you've never seen. Okay. Oh, okay. I did see some of that, but I definitely was not a huge fan to where I remember all the names. So thanks for letting me know. I'm reading Don Quixote for the first time. That's cool. I've only ever read sections of that. And I think I did so. It started in a Spanish class in high school, actually, before I could sort of speak Spanish. I can, for those, just so you know, I can speak Spanish, as in I can tell anyone who speaks Spanish anything that I need to say, and I can keep a conversation going, but I definitely sound like it is my second language, and I am okay with that. But I had to read it in a high school Spanish class because I had a teacher that really wanted us to learn the culture and learn Spanish, which was great. And then I ended up reading several excerpts later on, but I've never read the entire thing. That is something I might go back to at some point. I just discovered Jean Reese. I'm about to read 2 of her books and then another depressing book that looked good, The Silent Period. That's cool. Hello, I'm currently on The Once and Future King, the classic Arthurian fantasy. Nice. Yeah, I talked about that already, but no, I'm not an author myself. I don't know if I'll ever do fiction. Maybe, but I feel like you have to have the intense desire to be a fiction author in order to pull it off and be a good one. So I've never felt that intense desire to follow through on an entire fictional book. I maybe could do short stories. I don't know. I love books, obviously, and I love analyzing them, but I think a lot of the enjoyment for me comes in the analysis and the conversation that surrounds it. I don't know if I would be the person to become the crafter itself. Am I a book snob if I don't read popular books? You don't have to be. No, I think that people can read only classics and not be a book snob as long as they don't treat others like they aren't real readers or something. Like if there is the whole like, oh, everyone who reads this is dumb, then that makes you a little bit of a book snob, I would say. But it's more on how you view other people than about what you read yourself. I have gone through different periods of time where I have read popular books and periods of time where I have read books that might have been popular years and years ago. So I don't think that this is the number one trending book on Book Talk, but I am looking forward to it. So I think you can read whatever you want. It's about how you treat other people. I'm reading Peter the Great by Robert K. Massey. Hope you're doing well, Allison. I am, thank you. I plan on reading popular books, just not while everyone is discussing it. You want the time to pass so that you're, you know what, that could be a smart strategy, because if you don't end up liking a popular book, it might be better to say that a few years later than when everyone is loving it. Even though, I mean, I don't know if you ever talk about books publicly, but I don't know. With myself, could I get more views if I were to strategically choose books that everyone is talking about all the time? Probably, but I think that there's so much more fun in being able to critique something without getting criticized by people on the internet. And if you choose books that, and that's the hard thing too, is because I don't ever want to pick a book to sort of criticize that has no one reading it, because then that feels like you're taking a platform to criticize someone who doesn't have much of a platform. And as small as mine is, at this point, mine can be a little bit bigger than some authors. So I kind of do the careful thing in a way where it's like, I don't want to criticize the book that everyone is loving right at this moment, because I don't think that's needed. I think people can enjoy something, but I do like to criticize books that are just popular enough to where a good conversation doesn't end up being some sort of fandom problematic conversation, which I just don't need. I don't need anyone to take anything I say that too seriously, and sometimes people do online. I'm reading the Cat Girls from Outer Space book. You made fun of me when I hauled it. Okay, the reason I made fun of you is because I think, you have an opinion, and I like you, so keep all of that in mind. But you did this video about sort of being upset with all this smut and romantasy, which fair enough has gotten to the point where a lot of books being published kind of are tropey and all of this. But then you haul this book that's like smut for men that has like a bunch of cat girls, and I just had to laugh at that a little bit. That's all that was. I'm reading a new history of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Unfortunately, the author is a moron. Oh, okay. That's too bad. I love history books, and I know you read a lot, so I would definitely take a history book recommendation from Steve Donahue. But if that author is a moron, maybe I won't take that one because I don't read 3 books a day or whatever you do. Yeah, I think you're responding to that reading guy. That doesn't make you a book snob. Recursion was way better than Dark Matter, in my opinion. Okay, then when I go in and try Blake Crouch, maybe I'll try Recursion and see what I think of it. Personally, I think a book snob is defined by how judgmental someone gets about others' reading habits as opposed to what the person reads themselves. I would agree with that. The DCC audiobooks are some of the best there is. I know I've heard that over and over again, and I just, like I said, do I download Audible? I don't really use it. I would just be downloading it to listen to Dungeon Crawler Carl. But I probably do need to read book 4 at some point. I read the first 3 within like a couple months while I'm reading other books, of course. And then I really had a lot of fun with all of them, but I never got to the 4th one. So maybe I will try the audiobook. I'll just have to download Audible. During the time period, I think it was like a year ago, there was like one of those YouTube things where everyone was sort of really anti-Amazon and everyone was like, let's get out of the Amazon ecosystem. And then I actually did it to where like I read, my e-reader is a Kobo too. It was just, another big company. But I will say about the Kobo is when you look up a book, you get to see if it's in the library right away. And there's like these little dots and you can check it out from the library directly from the store, which is cool because if you are planning to read it right then, you can instead check it out. And I like how that does that. And there's also never advertisements on the Kobo. Like when you have a Kindle and you open up the screen, there's usually like an advertisement for another book or something, which is not the end of the world, but I always found that a little annoying. But the thing is what people, obviously I was being a little idealistic in the moment, and what people don't tell you when they're like, oh, let's all do this collective action and, create competition and all that, is that there are plenty of people who are completely locked in to the Amazon ecosystem. So it's kind of hard to actually go cold turkey, even if you don't like how they treat authors and stuff. So that's just one of those things where it's like the ideal is cool, but sometimes it doesn't work in practice as well. Okay, you're also reading 6 books right now. Yeah, I think I'm reading maybe 4. For the first time in years, I'm reading nothing. Okay, cool. That means you get to pick a new book. Dungeon Crawler Carl's okay so far, but when does it get good? I mean, I have no idea how far you're into it. I think it's also okay not to like Dungeon Crawler Carl. I think I did a video about it like 4 months ago where I was like, I don't even remember what I was saying about it. I said something random about it. And there were definitely some people in the comments who were like, oh, the hype will die down someday. And then people will realize Dungeon Crawler Carl isn't actually any good. I don't think, if people are having fun, I don't think it always has to measure up to every single way that you could possibly measure it. But I do think that there is definitely some real humanity that is shown through some of the characters in that series. I tried reading T.E. Lawrence's 7 Pillars of Wisdom, but I had to put it down because now is not the good time for a difficult but amazingly well-written book. Interesting, I have not read that one. From the look of it, it almost looks a little bit self-helpy, which I do read self-help books sometimes. There's also, and I don't know if that is, it could just be like a sort of philosophy thing, which, where's the line anyway? They kind of are very similar. I think that there's like a lot of people also who kind of gotten onto like the self-help books aren't good train. And I think that they can be good, but I would say probably in moderation on average. You don't need to read 20 self-help books in a row. But there have been a couple times where I've just been reading books on wisdom or books on philosophy or books on that could be categorized more than anything as self-help. And every once in a while, it can be pretty helpful for your life. I think sometimes people get a little bit too one side or the other on that. I got back into reading with the Star Wars Expanded Universe. I have not read any Star Wars books, but I grew up watching the movies all the time. The Last Magician series is a YA historical fantasy series. I might enjoy that. Honestly, like, I read very widely. I think sometimes you might get a certain idea of someone based off what they always feature on their channel, and I think I've lately been featuring things that seem a little bit more, I don't know, snooty. I don't know. Like, I think the last few videos I've done have been like books that are like, oh, this guy was born in 1899 and he said this and all of that. But I read a lot of things. Though the ones that are long lasting are the ones that truly have something to say. Yeah, that's true as far as books that are classics. How long have we been doing this? Wow. Okay, cool. So that now I know that I can just go live at any moment and have an unlimited amount of comments to respond to. That's interesting information. I'm reading Plutarch's parallel lives, specifically the lives of those Athenians from Theseus to, I don't know how to say that name, except that their parallels are missing because Penguin compiled them in another volume. That's unfortunate. So there's a book about a Christian family in southern India. The book is non-linear. I think some of those multi-generational stories can be really interesting to read just because of all the different things you get to learn of the culture and the family and the setting. I'm not sure which book that one is referring to at this point, but I would definitely read a multi-generational sort of story about a Christian family in southern India. Or I don't know if it's multi-generational. I guess it might just be about a family in a moment of time. I read one of Susan Mallory's beach reads last month, and it was wonderful. She can write incredibly well-written female characters. You know what? I was reading, well, I have it right here because I thought I might mention it because I'm reading it right now. I had very low expectations, and this is a different book than what you're talking about, but it's female characters. I had kind of low expectations for this thriller book that I picked up. Not because I don't like thriller books, but because the whole concept of this is like a birthday party for a 16-year-old girl from the South, and I wasn't sure what direction that was going to take. And I'm kind of at the point in my life now where I'm 29, and at this point, the 16-year-old girls' birthday parties aren't as fun to me conceptually. I'm not watching like the teenage shows anymore that are streaming on Netflix or whatnot. I'm slightly past that age to where I enjoy that. So I wasn't sure. But this book has two women that it follows. Well, it has more, but it has the current wife of a man and the ex-wife of a man, and those are both like points of view. And the way you can kind of see the dynamics of the marriage of the second wife through the lens of what the first wife has already been through is really interesting, because it's obviously not obviously, but it's one of those situations where the first wife is the same age as the man and the second wife is significantly younger, to where she's only like 10 years older than the teenager that he has. And you get to see how he treats women, basically. And he's also like a therapist, which is really adds another layer to where he always is constantly having this level of authority for how his current wife is feeling, and is always telling her what she needs to do and how she needs to feel and how she needs to fix that, forcing her to go to his friend who is also a therapist that works in the same building. So I don't know. I think it was just really interesting to end up seeing that this ends up being a lot about really interesting female characters and how they have interacted with the same man, and how you can see the same person from different perspectives, from a lot of different angles. And I am enjoying this a lot more than I expected it to, because of our ability to see the same man from the eyes of not just those two women, although those are the most interesting, but through many different women. And I felt like it really showed something real about the female experience in a situation like that. Yours is probably nothing like that, but I figured I would share. In between projects at work, so I have way too much free time at the moment, might venture into writing shorts to occupy myself. Oh yeah, short stories between 2,000 and 5,000 words can be really fun. Now, not to just keep plugging books, but I mean, I am a book channel, right? I can just constantly plug books. But I In the past, I don't think I've really been into short stories as much, and I recently got this from a used bookstore that didn't come out too long ago. The Last Dangerous Visions, and this is like a bunch of science fiction short stories from different authors compiled into one volume. So I'm going to try to get into reading short stories again as well. Because at this point, I think I actually enjoyed them more. I've been enjoying sort of like short fiction from like literary magazines lately. So there's no reason why I wouldn't enjoy like fictional short stories from just like an anthology. I think I'm a little burned out. I love reading so much, but I went a little too hard in 2025. I think that can happen with anything that you enjoy in any hobby. And you know what? Sometimes it's okay to do something else for a minute until you get a little bit of the passion and enjoyment back. Yeah, I'm becoming a teacher, and yes, I am Canadian. Okay, that's great. I wonder, are you going to be I would guess, because I've seen a couple videos on his channel. For context, I would guess that you would probably be going into high school. But if you're going to be an elementary school teacher, good job for that too. That is a really hard job. But I think you're probably going to be a high school teacher, maybe an English teacher. A small reading break can be welcome sometimes, yes. If you could recommend one super long fantasy series, which would it be? What do you consider for long? I mean, I think that everyone should definitely read Lord of the Rings at some point, but that's not all that long. I haven't read as many as some people might think I have, because I know that BookTube in general is very fantasy leaning, and I have read some fantasies, but I don't think I could say anything that anyone else wouldn't also say. I've read quite a few of Brandon Sanderson's books, but everyone's recommending him, so I don't feel like I have anything unique to say on this topic. I wish I did. I probably should go back. I'm actually kind of compiling a list, and I don't have it up right now, so I don't know who's on it, of like fantasy books that are like really good according to people, but don't get talked about all the time, just to maybe go back in time and read some of those underrepresented fantasy books, because I think that could be kind of fun, especially since everyone loves fantasy so much. Talking about ones that don't always get talked about could be a fun activity. But at the moment, I'm underqualified, unfortunately. I'm about to start a Deadly Education. So excited. Is that the Naomi Novik book? I think it is. Sorry, I know that people are probably telling me right now, but this chat is so much. Yeah, it is Naomi Novik. I actually really preferred for her other books. Not that, I mean, Deadly Education is fine, but I personally thought that her best book that I have read is Spinning Silver. And then I also enjoyed Uprooted more than I enjoyed A Deadly Education. I wonder if people on that or not. I know A Deadly Education is probably her most popular one, and people talk about it the most, I feel like, but the other ones are better, in my opinion. And she also just came up with like a short little novella that I have on my Kobo called The Summer War, and I'm interested in giving that a try, because I think she can be a really good author. I just tend to, I don't know why, I can't define why, but I feel like A Deadly Education had like a different style than a lot of her other books. Maybe it was more YA or something. It might have just been that, but I tend to like her other ones more. I hope you are aware that at least 2,000 books are published a day on Amazon. Oh, yes, I am aware. I've thought about... I really love this e-reader. I am not lying. Like, this e-reader is amazing. Like, I preferred it to the Kindle that I used to read on all the time, but I've definitely thought about just getting a Kindle to use just for the books that I can only read on Kindle, especially like the self-published books that I have a desire to read. And I probably will do that. It's one of those things where there's no easy solution to any of that, so I might just do both. Don Quixote aged surprisingly well. I'm Hispanic and can't speak Spanish. You know what? I've actually met a lot of people who are Hispanic who can't speak Spanish. I think that's pretty common. I only speak Spanish because I was Mormon for years, and they sent me to Mexico on a mission. If I did not have that life experience, I definitely wouldn't speak it either. So it's not like I just read a book and then became able to have conversations in Spanish. It was through a lot of hard work and embarrassing situations. And I think what it did give me was a lot of empathy for people who come to the United States and don't speak English, because when you're learning a language, and it took me about 3 months to where I could be kind of conversational. Obviously, it would get better over the time. A Mormon mission is 18 months long, and I'm not Mormon anymore, for the record. I always like people to know that. But people tend to think that you're not very smart until you have the vocabulary to be able to express complex ideas. So I think that is also the case here. Like when I was over there, and I was treated really well. I don't want to make it sound bad, but people would assume that you're kind of like a kid until you can speak better than a kid. And I think of all the people who come and learn English over here, and how often do people think that they're not very intelligent when in fact they very well can be, but they just can't speak the language that well. So I have empathy for that, because in a very different sense and with completely different power dynamics, I have been through it a little bit too. I am taking a break from Star Trek books and reading Neuromancer. It's good, a little hard to follow, but engrossing. Nice. I haven't read any of the Star Trek books either. I have watched a little bit. I took ASL in high school, so anybody who took Spanish knows Spanish better than me. My sister is really into ASL. She wanted to get more into it as like a side hobby thing for a while, but she didn't quite follow through all the way on that. But she knows it pretty well, actually. Currently reading Team of Rivals, The Political Genius of Abraham Lincoln. Nice. I read some Abraham Lincoln books when I was younger, but honestly, I couldn't tell you the titles of them right now. I do not think I've ever read that one, though. Hi. The aversion from long fantasy series. Though with Shannara, it doesn't bother me too much. Worth saying that the series has like 40 books, so I'm in it for the long haul. Oh. Can you still hear me? It says my connection is unstable, which will be crazy. I mean, if it ends, it ends. Yeah, 40 books is a long time. I was talking on another live stream that wasn't on my channel the other day, and you know the one huge fantasy universe that I would actually enjoy reading and has actually pitched itself to me enough for me want to do it is Discworld. I think that doing the Discworld books could be really fun. It's miraculous that it was ever published at all. Okay, I don't know what we're talking about there. Oh my gosh, there's so much going on here. I think I lost the plot, guys. Okay, here we are. Oh, I do speak Spanish. So you are recommending me an album to listen to. Okay. I can definitely do that. I do listen to some music, but I don't listen to as much music as some people do because I'm always reading books. But I have listened to a lot of the popular songs in Spanish, and do have a lot of nostalgia for certain songs that were playing on the streets when I was in Mexico. I'm a book snob and I read popular books. The two things are not connected. Fair enough. Okay. Yeah. You are one of those like really deep thinkers that will always have something unique to say about something. So I'd be interested to hear your logic on that. I'm sure you have it. Do you have an e-reader at all? Yeah, I just talked about it, but I know that this is definitely behind. Yeah, I have a Kobo. It's well, since I'll just show it to you. It's the Kobo Ellipsa 2E, I think, but it's the big one. It's like the Kindle Scribe. I do actually highlight and write a little bit on ebooks with the stylus, but more than anything, I think I'm in the minority when it comes to preferences for e-readers, because I like to feel like I have something substantial in my hands, and I don't like to be turning the page all the time. So people are always praising ebooks for being super small and compact and you can take anywhere and they don't weigh very much and all of that. I think that I much prefer the large ones. The small ones, you're literally turning the page every like 30 seconds, especially if you are a somewhat fast reader. And I don't know, there's something about just feeling like I'm holding a book, even if it's an e-reader, that I like about the larger one. So I do tend to read on larger e-readers. That's why if I get a Kindle just to read some of the self-published books that I would like to be able to read from the Kindle, I don't think I'm going to get a Kindle Scribe because I already have this thing for most of my books. I think I would get one of the smaller ones, just one of the basic ones again. But I think that it will annoy me a little bit because I do like sort of the bigger e-readers. What do you typically read? What appeals to you about the idea of a long fantasy? Oh, that's not for me. I was like, yeah, that's not for me. Okay. Been reading Dreamcatcher by Stephen King. Was curious about, oh my gosh, I don't know how to say that last name. Krasnaporkai. And it's not easy to read his book since he doesn't use paragraphs. Oh, you know what? There's definitely a lot of people who stylistically choose not to use different sort of common things, and it's not always my favorite thing in the world either. I am reading A Diary of Anne Frank. Yeah, that's a good book. I had to read that in high school, I think. Here, let me drink some water. For nonfiction, do you read memoirs? Yes, I do. I listen to My Story by Elizabeth Smart and want to read Becoming by Michelle Obama. Really enjoy Jeanette McCurdy's I'm Glad My Mom Died. I have read the Elizabeth Smart one years ago. I think I was literally a teenager, and it was because my grandmother read it first and she wanted me to read it. So she definitely went through a lot, and that was an interesting memoir, but I read it when I was like 17 at this. So at this point, I might not remember all the little details. I have thought about reading the Jeanette McCurdy book. Earlier today, I was watching the YouTube channel Mormon Stories, which I've told you guys that I'm ex-Mormon before, and it's just kind of like a good channel for people who are members of that church and ex-members of that church to talk about different things. And he had on David Archuleta, who was like a kid in like 2008, 2010, I don't know, 2008 maybe, that was on American Idol. And he got second place and ended up having a little bit of a career with singing, and especially tied really closely to the church. And he just released a memoir earlier. It might have been today. It was either earlier this month or today or something, that's called Devout. And I think it's about his experience with like being gay, coming out in a church that doesn't quite accept that, and his experience with religious scrupulosity, which I have not read it, but I was watching him talk about it a little bit earlier today. That seems to be in the same vein of the three that you're mentioning there. Myths of the Origin of Fire. Is that a nonfiction book or is that a fiction book? Is that just actually myths on the origin of fire? Which, you know, I think could actually be pretty cool. I'm looking it up, sorry. James Fraser. Isn't that the guy in Outlander? I'm not saying that isn't that his name though, or is it? I don't remember. I know that's not him. Oh wow, this is a mythology book from a Scottish social anthropologist, the late 1800s. Oh, that's cool. I have not heard of that before. Hello, currently reading Hurricane Season by University. Oh, that's nice. It's lovely when you finally have time to read something that you choose yourself. I do remember being a college student, and I was reading constantly because I was in a lot of history classes, but I was not always choosing what I was reading. I do talk about books publicly, but I have a small base, so not too worried about upsetting any feathers. I probably shouldn't be either. I really just detest any sort of online drama. So I try not to ruffle feathers of anything that's way too popular in the moment. What do you think about a mix of dark romance plus fantasy plus theology plus philosophy of Marquis de... Oh my gosh, I wish I was better at pronouncing random things. I'm well read. I'm not well listened to. Do you think something like that might be something interesting. Yes, I mean, I think it's all execution and what you actually do. I think you can have any idea for a genre or a mix of genres, and if you do it well, it can be good. I don't think there's any book that is bad just because of the category we place it in. I'm reading Later by Stephen King. I have not read Later by Stephen King. I did watch the recent Stephen King TV show. I don't remember, The Institute. And I've read several of his books throughout time. The Wheel of Time is an abomination. I feel like that's so random. Was anyone talking about The Wheel of Time? I did read the first book at one point, and I don't think I actually enjoyed the first book that much, to be completely honest. It wasn't bad, but it didn't make me want to read however many books are in The Wheel of Time. I'm reading Rubicon by Tom Holland, a portrait of the Roman Republic at the end of its existence and its transition into the Roman Empire. Cool. Hello, Allison, longtime listener, first-time caller. I just finished The Certainty of Stars from Fiona Holland. 54 pages of short poems that were so impactful, worth checking out. You know what? I think I mentioned this at some point somewhere, but I am at the point where I still haven't gotten that much into poetry. I mean, I've read some of like the really older stuff, like the Iliad and the Odyssey and things like that, but like modern poetry, I've read a little bit. I know some things about some famous poets from the last few hundred years, more so about like their own lives and what they went through. But like poetry itself, like just reading poetry, I haven't really gotten into that yet. Not saying that I couldn't, but I will say that I feel for me to enjoy a poem, it has to say something and I have to understand it. There are some really good, well, I guess one that I really enjoyed was reading through the poems of Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, who was like a nun in the 1600s. Some of those were really good. So, I mean, if the person has something to say and I can understand what they're saying, I do enjoy them. But there just has not been too many yet that I have read. Just have to take large breaks with other books to power through. Are we talking about? I don't know what we're talking about there. My bad. We're talking to each other. That's good. Love that. How did your reading of Kant's Critique of Pure Reason go? It is still sort of going. I guess I try to decide how useful it is to get into the depths of philosophy. Throughout time, throughout my life, throughout my life, I have definitely sort of been introduced to different philosophical ideas. And in the class that I was a teaching assistant for, I did have to talk about some of the different political philosophers, and we did have to read some things, especially the obvious ones that are always talked about, like John Locke or someone like that. And Kant, it's just so much. And I don't do it by myself because I'm not a genius by any means. I've been when I was working on it, I was following a sort of like a YouTube thing on it and kind of reading through and then listening to someone who knows what they're talking about with each section. And it's interesting, but it kind of, there's a point where it's like, sometimes we just have to recognize things are real enough to talk about them. And if they're not, oh well. Philosophy can get a little bit too navel-gazing and deep sometimes, I think. And I like that, but there's a line even for me. If you're looking for history, consider Shelby Foote's Civil War trilogy. Okay, I will. Catgirls from Outer Space has a warning. No shaming, I just think it's funny. You know what? Maybe I should also read Catgirls from Outer Space. I'm 200 pages in and enjoying my time. I don't think we're talking about Catgirls here anymore. Hi, Allison. I'm reading American Rapture by C.J. Lead. Isn't that a popular thriller writer? No, and a romance called Rewrite Our Story by Kat Singleton. So one zombie horror book and one cowboy romance. Fun. Warning, Catgirls from Outer Space is a fast-paced, action-packed sci-fi adventure romance for men where the hero saves the day and gets all the girls. See, there are books for men that are just like the books that are always made fun of for women. Is that like a harem novel, it sounds like, where the guy gets all of the beautiful cat girls in space? I'm sure there's a lot of testosterone in that book for the guy getting all the girls. I'm currently reading 27 books. Okay, that's too much for me. I can't be currently reading 27 books. I mean, how does that even work? Do you just like forget about a book, but you know you're eventually going to get back to it, so it's on like your currently reading thing on whatever reading app you're using, or are you actually keeping up with 27 books at a time? I do really like your Rex. I'm catching up on popular English titles and classics right now. And Added Mania. Yeah, that one was definitely a controversial read and a controversial pick, and not everyone agrees with the politics of the author for sure. But you know what? I think that it was still worth reading, and what I really enjoyed in that book was the main character's experience with deconstruction from being a Jehovah's Witness member and how she applies that to later things that happen throughout this like dystopian novel as far as censorship and things like that go. So I definitely still think it was worth a read, but a lot of people definitely think that's a very, very controversial pick. Actually, I'm Star Wars comics from the 70s. There's a character named Don Juan Quixote or something like that, which is like having Cervantes in Star Wars. It's pretty fun. That would actually be super fun. I just hit page 200 of The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. I read his First Law trilogy, but I haven't read The Devils yet. I think that one just came out last year. Every bit as good as his First Law work. Good to know. Starting Hell House by Richard Matheson now, and I have Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen on my list too. Nice. I've read Northanger Abbey, and I've heard of Hell House. Reading City of Illusions by Le Guin. I need to read Le Guin. That is honestly someone that I've meant to read for years, but I have not actually read Ursula K. Le Guin yet, as surprising as that might be, given that I like books that are a little bit older and I enjoy some fantasy. I just finished Seeing Like a State by James C. Scott. It's really good history and anthropology with an anarchist bend. You know what? We need to read a little bit of everyone, so that's cool. If I want to read a self-help book, I'll read my journal. Do you tell yourself what to do in your journal? Do you give yourself advice on life in your journal? Sometimes I do. I have been a big journaler since I was young. I have actually transcribed journal entries from when I was like 4 or 5, and adults in my family would transcribe my thoughts onto the page as if I was writing the journal myself. So I have it going really far back in my life, and they are some of my biggest treasures. I probably should digitize them or something at some point, just in case something ever happens. But you know what? At some point, like, life just goes on. If you lose something like that, it's whatever. You're the best, of course. Oh, thank you. About the journal, mine would be a self-crisis, so I might need to read yours. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people in their journals are just talking through things. Even though I feel like a lot of my journal entries through my life, like I'll talk through something and then by the end I have like this big philosophical idea for me, and then I read it years later and I'm like, oh my gosh, I thought so much of myself, but I was literally just 17 there coming up with nonsense. No, I think I've always been able to sort of reframe things to get to the next day, but I haven't been through the worst things in my life, so there's that. Thank you. Wow, again, thanks. I am 4 years older than you. I am 29. That would make you 25. Has anyone read and finished the Chronicles of Narnia series? I read that as a kid. I'm very slowly getting through the books in publication order. Just finished Prince Caspian and watched the movie last month. Oh, to be 29 again. Sounds interesting. Let's see. Those I've read the Narnia books around the same time those movies came out, which was kind of fun. I think like when you're a kid and you're reading something and then it gets adapted, that's just really fun. And I think it constantly happened when I was a kid. Like, you read the Narnia books and then they got adapted. You read the Harry Potter books and then they got adapted. You read the Hunger Games books and then they got adapted. You read the Divergent books and then they got adapted. I think I was in a perfect time to read a book and then immediately be able to see a movie, which is just fun. I think it just is like I think that itself could help get kids into reading, is just have that culture around a couple of really popular series that kids like, and then have a discussion around it. I feel like they were really common when I was younger, and it's less common now, I feel like, but maybe I'm just not plugged in. Yes, Le Guin. The Dispossessed, I did watch a book review on that book, and I wrote it down to read it soon, but I haven't started it yet. I read Northanger Abbey at the start of this year. I've been educating myself in the Gothic genre, and it's really an anti-Gothic novel, recursive and more interesting than I expected. Do you buy all your books new? Do any used oh gosh. Do you buy all your books new? Do any used book shopping? I have bought a lot of new books in my life, so I'm not gonna lie. But lately I've been doing almost exclusively used book shopping and buying anything new that I would want that I could get new from like just as an ebook, because it gets really expensive after a while, and I just like doing it that way. And I think that kind of just going through a used bookstore gets you to see things that you don't see all the time. So I've been enjoying kind of exploring used bookstores lately, but I've definitely done a combination of both over time. And of course I've used the library too. Let's not forget that's an option. I've downloaded a lot of things from the library, and I also have a library in walking distance from me. So sometimes I walk to the library. Oh. Oh. Dang. I remember the Narnia series, but it's decades since I've read them. At this point, I would need a reread to remember all the details. I remember some of the bigger themes and some of the bigger scenes, but to remember all the details of all of the Narnia books, I would have to reread them. Dangerous Visions is an important anthology to find the American new wave of science fiction. Yes, and I know that the one I grabbed from the used bookstore is like number 3, so I could always go back and read number 1 and 2 if I enjoy the stories I read in the third one. High school English and social studies are the classes I want to teach. How come you didn't last in education? Well, I am also in a district that is not a very good district for education. You know, in the United States, it's based off of states and districts. It was to the point where they were paying teachers who were 1 or 2 years into their career more than they were paying teachers that were like 15, 20 years into their career. Like, it was just super corrupt. Everyone in charge of it were super corrupt. Everyone around me was super depressed. And there was just a lot of negative energy around education. I mean, the kids I was teaching couldn't read very well, so I spent a lot of time on remedial reading and all of that. And it was just exhausting. So I just personally decided I didn't want to do it. But like I said, it has a lot to do with where you are, and it has a lot to do with what your skills are. And while I do think I'm able to sort of teach, as far as like get in front of a classroom and teach a concept and respond to questions and talk to people, I wasn't prepared to become like a reading instructor in 10th grade when people are at like all different levels. There was also some really bad discipline problems, and it was kind of a time period where they were kind of like an anti-discipline stance, to the point where a kid could do anything in the classroom and get away with it, and there was nothing you can do unless you made like this massive case, which was a lot, was just draining. So that is what happened with me. But I mean, I have a job now and I'm in a good place. So no bad blood or anything. I think teaching is great and very important, and I respect everyone who does it and hope that it can be a good career for people who go into it. Dresden Files number 18 came out last month, and we're still kind of far from the end if you're into urban fantasy. I could definitely try. I've heard of the Dresden Files so many times. I could definitely try them. Oh. You're reading a short story collection called Chrysalis, and next up is a novella called At a High Cost. This is my year of reading Ukraine. I love it when people have reading projects like that, where they choose a theme and they really dig deep and try to learn about it. I mentioned the how to read a book in my last video, and you know, when I was reading this, and I'm still not completely finished because I've been taking this one a little bit slowly. You know, it's funny though, because when I'm reading this and people walk in the room that know me, they're like, isn't that the one thing that you absolutely know how to do, is how to read a book, which I would say I pretty much do know how to read a book. But part of this towards the end, it kind of gets into skills for reading multiple books and analyzing multiple books that all kind of can be in conversation with each other, and some of the ways to kind of go about a larger reading project. And I think that is just a really fun thing. So I love when people do that. And you should get to the point, you should be skilled to the point eventually where you're able to read completely unrelated books and make connections between them. Allison, love your channel. Any thoughts on when we will pass through the romantasy storm and what next trend might be? I have no idea what the next trend will be. I don't think I set them, unfortunately. If I did set them, we would have some interesting stuff coming up. But I will talk about whatever I want anyway. So I will review lots of different books in the upcoming year. It's only 3 books, but you should look at Le Guin's Earthsea series. Yeah, no, that one's definitely one I should read. It's been on my radar forever, and it's definitely something that should happen soon. Earthsea is more than 3 books. Good to know. 5 novels plus a short story. Reading Wuthering Heights due to the film. Yeah, the film has been pretty heavily criticized for being nothing like the book. I heard that the film doesn't even cover the second generation of the story because, Wuthering Heights is Heathcliff with Catherine in the first generation and then him with her children. And that's too bad that the film didn't actually cover the whole thing and took out some of the actual purposes of the book. I've always personally, I know it's her sister, but I've always preferred Jane Eyre to Wuthering Heights if we were to compare them. I bought a bind-up last year of the first 4 Earthsea books. I need to buy one. But we were told that nobody could understand Bad Bunny because he was performing in Spanish. I didn't even watch the Super Bowl. I don't watch sports. But yes, I'm sure plenty of people can understand him. And if I go and watch it, I probably could understand most of it too. Neuromancer's writing is a little opaque, not gonna lie. Good to know. I love William Gibson, just finished his Bridge trilogy, and I'm waiting for my video on All Tomorrow's Parties to finish uploading so I can go to sleep. Oh yeah, I think he's in Germany, if I remember correctly. Yes, Discworld. I will be doing Discworld. I did a whole year alternating Discworld books with Star Wars. Discworld was better of the 2. Discworld is a series that I can honestly say changed my life. Yeah, no, I'm definitely thinking about reading those just because, more than anything, because they sound fun. Like, that is the reason I want to read Discworld. That is literally it. Do you have any other hobbies other than reading? I am a big board gamer. I actually blew up on YouTube one time. Got like over 200,000 views when I was like in my early 20s talking about board games, just like my favorite board games. I play board games every Sunday for 12 hours. So between that and reading, I don't have time for more hobbies. That is my other one. I read somewhere that the children's Kindles might be a better deal than the regular ones. I had no idea that there was such a thing as a children's Kindle. For steampunk, I would always recommend Pavane by Keith Roberts. Interesting. Modern poetry is just so off-putting to me, not gonna lie. It's pretty much just overly melodramatic purple prose where the author hits the enter key too often without regard for meter or rhyme. Honestly, I think that's what's turned me off of poetry a little bit. I know that there's a lot of great poets, and I'm not trying to lump them all together by any means because I would be wrong. But I feel like I've seen a lot of people post just like, and I know that's just regular people and anyone could post, but I've seen like different people post like their own poetry on Substack. And it's not very often that I'm impressed by it. Sometimes, but not very often. Critique of Pure Reason is definitely brutal. Yeah, no, I've read a lot of the other philosophy books up to this point, so I was like, I want to try something hard, and it's hard. And I also don't even know if it's all that necessary to understand it that deeply. So I have been doing it, and it's been like a sort of little side project I've done in addition to all the books I've been reading, just slowly over time. Who knows if I will actually do anything about it, though, other than know a little bit of stuff. For poetry, many points to the Romantics as a place to start. I would suggest T.S. Eliot. I have actually learned a little bit about T.S. Eliot. Regarding languages, it happens to me too. I currently live in Russia, still don't have a nice level for complex conversation, and I always have the impression that people think I'm dumb. Yeah, no, it's just like when you can't express yourself and say all the things that you mean to say and express complex ideas, and all you can do is sort of basic stuff, people then tend to think that you're not that smart. And it's just because they're not thinking about it that deeply. I don't necessarily think it's malicious all the time. It's just if you never hear someone say anything that sounds complex or intelligent, you don't think they are. And that is just sort of rough. And I obviously got a very light version of that because it wasn't like I was moving to Mexico for life and building a life there. And I did quickly get better because it was one of those situations where you talk to people all of the time. But it definitely just gives me a lot of empathy for people who are in situations where they have to learn another language fast. And it's more important. The stakes are higher than they were for me. It gives me a lot of empathy. That's all. How much BookTube do you watch? A lot. I watch a lot of BookTube. It's one of the main things I watch on YouTube. For example, a lot of the people who are booktubers in here, I've watched some of their videos, like yours. I've seen some of your videos. You know that. I've commented on your videos a few times. Just to be clear, James C. Scott was a professor at Yale, very much high academia anarchism, similar to David Graeber. Cool. I have not looked that deeply into anarchism. I think I've read some short essays on anarchism and anarchist ideas when I was in college, but it's just been so long, and I have not studied it at any level beyond that. So you would have more to say on it than me for sure, and I'm sure you have a lot of videos talking about it. You make so many videos. Working on Fahrenheit 451. Awesome. Just got here. What am I reading? Just finished up 1,000 Autumns. Nice. Would you ever crash test a dramatized adaptation? I liked your insight on audiobooks already being kind of an interpretation from the narrators. There's even more stuff going on in DAs. I don't think I have very much commentary on that. But yeah, I do think, like I said in my video, that there's just a lot of interpretation that goes on with every single layer of something. Speaking of reading two new books by a couple of my favorite authors this last month reminded me of how much fun reading can actually be. So I just reread A Song of Ice and Fire this year. That is one that I did read as well. I mean, probably 10 years ago at this point, whenever the TV show was really big. Dramatized audiobooks are just radio plays for an age after radio. You know what? The book that I already mentioned that I'm reading right now, the thriller, this is like one of those. I'm reading it a lot, or I'm listening to it a lot with audiobook. I know some people are really picky about what is reading and what is not, because I go on long walks sometimes, and I usually, when I go on walks, I'll pick something like a thriller that oftentimes has simpler language and I don't have to think as deeply about. Like, it just kind of shows you characters and what they're going through. It's not usually, there's stuff to it. There's depth to the characters being portrayed and everything, but it's not the deepest form of literature most of the time, so it's easy to listen to. And it has one of those audiobooks where there's every single perspective has a different person voicing it, and I think those can be really fun. Evangeline Walton adapted the Welsh mythology book the Mabinogion into 4 excellent fantasy novels. You know what? I actually have her written down for someone that I want to read eventually. I am reading Staying Power, A History of Black Peoples in the British Isles, in the Penguin Book of the British Short Story. I'm reading British stuff all year. Oh, you're another person that's doing a project on a lot of the same topic. Those are great. On Neuromancer's style, Gibson was heavily influenced by the Beats writers, and it shows in his style. It is just very different from classic science fiction fantasy style. At least I think that's what SF means. I don't know what the SF thing means, Raph. Has a book ever changed your life? A self-help book or a novel that hit all the right notes? I feel like every book changes my life a little bit. Every book connected together gives me an insight on humanity and on things that are important and gives me something else to think about. So I don't know if there's a single book that has ever changed my life. I mean, we talk about the books that got us into reading constantly because they open the door, but I don't think there is a single book that I live my life based off of or that has changed my life to that level. Any booktubers you would like to live stream with? I don't know. I guess we'll see in the future if that ever happens. I think that there's a lot of awesome people, and I'd be open to it for a lot of people. I speak 3 languages fluently, and I can read another 2, but still people think I'm dumb. That's rough. No, being able to speak so many languages takes a certain type of intelligence for sure. And you know what's the most interesting thing? The most interesting thing about being bilingual, because I only can speak Spanish because I haven't put the time and energy into learning other languages other than the 2 languages that I've had to know in my life for practical reasons. But once I learned another language, it made me realize how many things you can learn about your own culture based off of how you say things in your own language. And there's a quote from someone that I read, I think in a textbook actually, for like learning Spanish, that was like, you don't know very much about your own language until you learn another one. So I think that there's just a whole nother level of intelligence that comes from, and it's not like the highest or anything. Like I think there's tons of different intelligences and they're all valid, but there is a certain intelligence that you get once you've learned multiple languages because you get to view the world from so many different ways. And that's why I would strongly hope that we choose human translators over AI translators, even as they get more sophisticated, because oftentimes you have to translate meaning more than translate something in a literal way. And I think the work of a human translator is sometimes underappreciated because a lot of people don't recognize how much of the creative process they're actually a part of, as they have to take something that means something in one language and make it make sense in another language and have the same feeling. So I don't know if that had anything to do with what you just said. I think I just went off on a random thing, but that happens sometimes. If something is written in a style I'm less familiar with, older prose, poetry, I find audiobooks really helpful to train my brain so I read and process it the right way. That's a really interesting perspective. That's like the opposite of what I said. I generally read things that are easy or listen to things that are easy as an audiobook and then read things with my eyes that I think I have to focus on. But there is definitely something to getting sort of like the help or the immersion type reading where you do both at the same time. In the book that I mentioned a couple times, How to Read a Book, he even mentions that sometimes when something is hard, just read it through once and then go at it again. Because getting the main idea from things or just going through and accomplishing something hard itself is sometimes sort of a block into a deeper understanding of something that is hard for you. Finnegan's Wake works surprisingly well in audio because of that. Yeah. That makes sense. SF by itself just means science fiction. Science fiction fantasy would be all of them. That makes sense. We need a video of you debating Steve Donahue about romantasy. What would be the debate? Like, would he disagree that some romantasies sometimes can be good, even though a lot of them are bad? Because that's kind of my stance. I don't feel like I have a strong stance. I live my life according to Winnie the Pooh. Never failed me yet. You know what? Isn't there like a book called like the Tao like of Pooh or something? Like a Taoism book that's like Winnie the Pooh, and the guy just goes or is it the Tao of Pooh? And the guy just goes around and Benjamin Hoff. I think I saw that at my mom's house once. So you could probably live your life off of the stories and wisdom found in Winnie the Pooh and do just fine. What kind of book project would you think is fun? I think a lot of them could be fun. And I tend to get a little antsy sometimes. So I like my book projects to be kind of like just 3 to 5 books. But at one point in life, I was like, maybe I would do that thing where some people have done, where you read like a book from every country in the world. But that is so many books and maybe too long of a project for me. I like to read 3 to 5 books that are related as projects, and on various topics. I don't have a one single topic I hyper focus on. I like to get randomly curious about something and then become like a little mini expert in it by knowing more than probably the general population, but only as much as you can learn in 3 to 5 books. AI will never catch that nuance which comes with how we interpret things. Exactly. And I think that, especially when you look at some of like the large YouTube channels that are using like the automatic AI translations, and maybe it doesn't really matter for something like a Mr. Beast channel that's huge, when there is not like necessarily a lot of meaning behind the word choice. But when it comes down to other things, like books, if we just give everything over to AI translators, we're going to be missing a lot of nuance. And I think that is definitely a thing where I would like a human to be involved with the vast majority of translation. They've been trying to replace us human translators since the 90s. The tools that exist are fine for casual use, but the professional space is still safe for a while, in my opinion. That's good. Oh yeah, the Tao of Pooh. I was right. That is a book. Check out Way Station by Clifford Simak. It's about a Civil War veteran that secretly runs a way station for alien travelers. A very deep book by the end and mind expanding. That sounds fun. Which I have not read. You have not read the Tao of Pooh. You have your own philosophies from Pooh. You don't need to listen to someone else tell you what to think, I guess. Did you hear the controversy around Harlequin firing their French translators and moving towards AI translations? I did not, but that's upsetting. Even with something like a romance novel like that, I think, especially some of the older ones, that there's, I mean, there's some new ones that have really good language too, but some of the older ones do have some subtle choice of language that they use in them, and giving that over to AI, even if it's just a romance novel, and some people might have that attitude, I still think a human translator would be better. I'm following a reading list of 100 best modern fantasy novels. Who is an eminent science fiction fantasy critic? Lots of overlooked titles on it, but all have been good so far. Maybe I should look at that too. The Tao of Piglet is also a book, not just the Tao of Pooh. Oh, the list covers 1946 to 1987. Interesting. Excellent point about translating. People I know who do this point out that you interpret meaning rather than translating words. Exactly. It's not, I mean, sometimes it's a simple translation word to word, but so many times when there's a way to say something in one language, but not a way to say the exact same thing in another language, there's words that exist in other languages that don't exist in English. And you have to translate meaning and feeling. And it's almost like the translator is like the audiobook narrator, in that they are part of it too. It's not just you and the author when you're reading a translated work. It's you, the author, and the translator in a room. And I don't want it to be me, the author, and ChatGPT. I'd rather it be me, the author, and a human who's thought about the author's work. Any reading projects you're in right now? I am reading fiction books that have undertones of Christianity in them, but in like a mythology type way. That's why I'm reading that Between Two Fires book that the one person mentioned earlier. Captions and translations are almost different things. Fair enough. Yeah. I've just seen that that's like a big thing where like there's like auto translations now on YouTube. And I do think that they're sort of different things, because casual speech is definitely a lot different than premeditated written works. Yeah, a lot of good fantasy in the time period of, what was it, the 40s to the 80s? I agree. Sometimes major works of some countries' literature aren't translated at all. I think an AI translator would be a good thing in that case. Like if you literally couldn't read the work except through the AI translator. Yeah, I'm not a hard line person on anything. I can think that there can be a use for it in some cases. I just have a preference, and I think the preference does make sense, but there's also practical things of, there's books out there that there isn't a single translation of. And having some access to the work is better than no access to the work. I would agree with that. What's your favorite period of history to read about? I like them all. I definitely went through a Civil War phase for U.S. history, and then I've gone through like a phase where I read like a lot of stuff from sort of medieval things. But I don't have like a one thing. I used Google Translate to read the original 1812-1815 edition of the Grimm's Fairy Tales. Where were the books you reread in December? What were the books you reread in December? Will you be doing any rereading this year? I reread a lot of the Anne of Green Gables books. There's like 8 of them, so I got through several of those. And then I reread one of the Naomi Novik books that I mentioned earlier in this video, because those were some of the first ones I read as like a young adult after being in college and stuff. How are you finding Between Two Fires? I'm liking it so far. But yeah, I'm going to talk about it more in a video coming up. Not like a review of it. I'm not going to do a dedicated review of Between Two Fires, but I am going to be talking about a specific scene that does not spoil the book in a larger conversation. So that's coming up soon. If you like Ray Bradbury, Clifford Simak is worth looking into. His other well-known novel is City. Cool. Features sapient dogs. Nice. Yeah, translation as accessibility is fine for the most part. That's why I said that I don't think it's a big deal. I think I did say that right. But the AI for books, for translation, I don't want to get to the point where we don't hire the same amount of translators that we already have because AI can do it. Like, sure, if there's some use case that is like above and beyond what we already have and AI is being utilized, I don't like it, but I can get over it. But a lot of like the great works, I would rather have a human translator for sure. I agree with what you're saying about translation and meaning. How fast does it take you to read a book on average? I mean, it depends on the length of the book and the contents of the book. If it's something that's like, I could read a book in a day if it's simple enough. But if it's something I want to slow down with, it might take me a week. The Brothers Grimm studied in my city and hated it. I do not want an AI translated book. That would be unreadable. Translation is much more of an art than a science. I agree. It is. I was actually reading, I don't even know where it is. Here it is. I don't know if you guys have heard of Brick, the literary journal. You do have to pay for it. It's like a subscription type thing. But there was an article in here on translation, a conversation with Kate Briggs, it's called, but she's a translator and she talks about translation and she says, translation is not proof of an equivalency between two words or sentences or texts. It is simply proof that a negotiation between two sides occurred. It is simple proof that someone with abilities in both the destination and the origin language used themselves as a conduit as they made a chain of concessions and decisions to produce a reenactment of the original as they understood it. This is why translation varies with every person who attempts it. Language difference is a function of cultural difference. So she's talking about how the translator is actually like part of it, a conduit between the two sides. It's someone who is able to understand one way of seeing the world, one language, and another way of seeing the world, another language. And it's it's artistic, just like you were saying. Like, sure, there are words that mean other words that are just simple this to that, but more than anything, it's an interpretation of a work put into a new language that someone else could then try to understand the feeling of it, but the translator is part of it. The closest thing to a reading project is trying to read based on History Heritage Month. I'm set for Black authors February, female authors March, Arab authors April, and Asian authors May. Nice. Yeah, those a lot of people do those. And those are definitely good events. I like them. I didn't know about female authors for March, though, which is crazy because I'm a woman. Brian Merchant has done excellent reporting on translators who lost their jobs to AI. His book, Blood in the Machine, is an excellent read, too. Good to know. You need to show your dogs on camera. Do you want to meet my dogs? I gotta go soon because we've been going for almost an hour and a half, but I'll let you meet my dogs. Oh, one of them's coming over. Here's Winnie. She doesn't want to be here. Okay, you can go down. Oh, and Percy, you want to come? Here's Percy. He needs to be groomed. His eyes are a little bit not ideal at the moment. But he's the protector. He's the barker. I only have 2. They're about the same size. They're both 20 pounds. Yeah, he is turning into a raccoon. He needs. I get him groomed every 6 weeks, and I try to brush him out several times in between that. But having a dog with that type of hair and a white dog with that type of hair is definitely very high maintenance. So I try my best, and we love him, but sometimes the eyes get a little bit out of hand. Okay, I think that we are going to end off for today, but thanks for... Did I adopt them? Yes, I did adopt them. I adopted Percy when he was 10 months old, and Winnie when recently. I adopted her last year when she was 2, and she's still 2, so very recent. Okay, I'm going to end that off there then because I got some other things to do today. But thanks for spending some time with me, and maybe I'll do some more live streams since this one was so easy to do. So thanks for tuning in. Bye.